Okay, so the next part talks about recommendations for your budget. So for any financial planners, basically, your budget should have sort of a general idea of what you're spending based off of certain percentage. So if we had 100% of a budget, we're saving money, whatever it is. There's certain categories in which we have to abide by just for general human consumption. So for example, the first one we have here, housing 30%. We have food at 25%. Transportation 12.5% of your budget. Clothing 7.5%, 5%, 5%, and 5% for insurance, health, and recreation. And savings should be about 10%. Okay. So what does that exactly mean? Well, say for example, I'm making about, let's use our calculator here. I'm making about $2,000 every 2 weeks. Let's say if I'm making 2,000, okay. If I want to multiply my percentage, which would be 30% or 0.3, okay, I'm spending about $600 on housing, okay, whatever shape, form, or that. I have a general idea. So what about food, right? What would be 25%, 0.25, multiplied by 2,000, my income, right, for that week? Right, I'm spending about $500 on food, okay, which seems pretty reasonable, right? But what about that spending, right? That saving, sorry, the saving part where we said generally about 10%. Well, if I'm making 2,000, I should be really to no. If I'm 2,000, multiply that by 10%. I'm making about $200. Okay, that's how much I'm recommended saving. Okay, you can save a little bit more. You don't want to save less than $200, but the more the better, of course. Right, so let's go through an example of what this looks like when we actually put certain budgeting into this form right here. So we're going to look through this form and kind of navigate through. We've talked about net income last time, monthly savings, monthly expenses, annual expenses, and summary. So given the question, I'll ask primary, secondary income. I'll ask for the monthly expenses, and I'll ask for as well as the annual expenses. So let's read through this question. You should have these notes online, so you should be walking basically right through me as I'm going through this, or walking with me. So Jason Williams and Cami Grimes are a young married couple who have just purchased their first home. Jason is a desktop publisher and receives, so let's highlight this, a gross salary of $480 a week. After deductions, his net, so again, we talked about net salary before. In this case, it's $370 per week. Cami is a pharmacy technician and receives a gross salary of $882 bi-weekly. After deductions, her net weekly bi-weekly salary is $742. So we want to highlight that. Those are going to be some key information that relates to the income that they make. One being bi-weekly here, and one being weekly, which would be right here, 370 a week. So keep those in mind as we're doing the budgeting forms. Okay, Jason and Cami prepare a budget each month. If their budget indicates a shortfall or deficit, they adjust the budget to remove the deficit. So Jason and Cami would like to purchase the living room furniture during the month of March. They expect their other expenses for the month of March to include the following. So you have a whole slew of expenses, and all you simply have to do is input that into the budgeting. So for example, it says monthly expenses. It'll give you mortgage or rent, car payment, telecommunications, hydro. All you simply have to do, because it labels it as the month of March monthly bills, these are all their monthly bills that you would have to input into the form. Okay, so that's for number 3. Number 2, we'll talk about number 1. We'll come back to number 1. Number 4 as well talks about the annual expenses. So right there, booyah. So annual expenses include the following: auto back payment, life insurance, property taxes on the new home, home insurance, newspapers, and periodics. All of these are done per year. So all you'd simply do is input them into annual amounts. Okay, in order to find the monthly amounts, Well, how many months are there in a year? 12 months, correct? So that means you would have to divide, right, your annual amount. So for example, if you did auto pack payments, so car insurance, um, you would take out the annual amount that you have here. So for example, let's do this one on the board here. Let's erase this. I'm gonna pause for a second. All right, we've talked about this concept of primary and secondary income, okay, the amount of money that you're making in your actual budget. So we talked about two, one from Jason, okay, and then the other one from, just pulling it up now, from Cami. So Jason and Cami together, young married couple. So this is Jason's income for the week, and this is Cami's income. But notice that this one is actually isn't per week. This is bi-weekly. Okay, it's gonna make a huge distinction as to what we're multiplying by. Okay, in order to find the annual amount, okay, we did this with credit and interest. We need to find number of weeks in a year. Well, if we're doing it from a weekly standpoint, what we actually want to do, just pulling up my pen, is basically we want to multiply by 52. Okay, 52 resembles weeks. Okay, it symbolizes how many weeks are in an actual year. We have $370, okay, per week. We want to multiply that by 52. Okay, we should get an answer of 19,240 and no cents. So that's how much Mr. Jason makes on an annual basis. All right. So that would be considered our primary income. The reason is because he makes a little bit more. Okay, just a bit more. Actually, no, he doesn't. All right. So for annual expenses, as I mentioned before, what we want to do is take how much per year. So for example, we talked about the auto pack insurance being $836.50. All we want to simply do is divide by 12, okay, in order to find just 1 month for the month of March in that case. So we just want to take the amounts, divide by 12. We should end up at a value of $69.71. We multiply that by 12. That's how much we'd get in that year. Okay, so that would be an example of what I'm looking for annual expenses when it's looking for the monthly amounts. Secondary income comes from Cami. So Cami, we have to make an important distinction here. Makes $742 bi-weekly. Remember that bi-weekly, okay, means every 2 weeks. She's making that much income every 2 weeks. So that's an important distinction to make. Because if you had done it with weekly, with 52 weeks, you would have gotten a different answer from the one I'm going to be looking for. Because it's every 2 weeks, we actually want to divide this by 2. So instead of 52 weeks, we want to divide by 2. We should get 26 weeks. So she actually gets paid 26 times in a year, opposed to Jason here gets paid every week, so 52 weeks. That's the important distinction. So we actually want to multiply this number, 26, by 742, how much Cami makes. And she makes a grand total of $19,292, no cents. Exactamundo. All right, so that is how you solve primary and secondary income. It didn't mention any other sources of income, so we're not going to fill out that portion. Alrighty, so make sure that you are filling in this form as we are going through, just a reminder. So we've talked about net income. We've filled out weekly amounts, okay, and we found the annual amounts. We're going to talk about this really soon, but before we get there, okay, we're going to finish the rest of it and just talk about that. Okay, monthly savings, we said that our recommended in this case is 10%. We'll talk about how we get this number right after. We've talked about the monthly expenses. All you have to do was fill out the numbers here, okay, and then add up the total monthly expenses. So after you add up the total, basically this is your total monthly expenses right here. Okay, on number 3. Next part is the annual expenses, which we filled out as well. Car insurance, life insurance, that all has to be filled in the annual amounts. And then all we simply have to do is divide by 2 to get your final answer for this. Okay, you should have all these notes down as I'm talking about it anyways. All right, so the next part we're going to talk about is how we get the average monthly income. Okay, what we simply have to do is take the annual amount. So in this case, the $19,240 that Jason made and the $19,292 that Cami made. We want to add those two, okay, and then divide by 12. So we'll show you exactly what that looks like. All right, so the next part is the annual income. That was number one. So okay, what I did first was I took the annual income of Jason and Cami. So this was their annual income that they make for the year. I wanted to total it since they're together, so you would have gotten 38,532. Okay, so in order to find the average monthly income that they make for a month, we just simply want to divide by 12. So when we divide their total annual by 12, this is how much they make on a monthly basis. Okay, so it should be, and it's here too as well for you to look at, 3,211. So that's what we're looking at right now for total amount. The monthly savings. Okay, so the monthly savings for number two talks about the percentage. Well, we've talked about percentage. Okay, average rule of thumb is you want to save at least 10% of your income. Okay, in this case, whether it's monthly or whether it's average, it should still come out to the same. In this case, we're looking at 10% of the 3,211. So the annual income in this case, we should get a monthly savings of $321, right? Which is what I did here. You simply just want to multiply, okay, in this case, what we got here, average monthly, by 10%. And we end up at $321.10 is how much they need to save on a monthly basis. Okay, assuming that they're making that same income every year or every month. Sorry. Okay. The next part now. So we've talked about net income, average monthly income done, monthly savings. We've talked about the monthly expenses. Make sure to add, okay, your total monthly expenses. So in this case, you have 2,744. Now comes the fun part. Now we want to do a summary, okay, because we're not quite done yet. We need to add up certain totals here. The nice thing about this PDF file is that it actually gives you every single part we've just talked about and summarized. It also gives you a little bit of direction as to what they're looking for, or what you should be looking out for. So average monthly income, as we talked about before, gives you right there. Okay, so 3,211 is our average income. That's how much they make. That's how much they could possibly spend, humanly possible. They couldn't go over that without, which we'll talk about. If they do, we call that a deficit. So in this case, their savings. So you got to take that out from the income. Their savings. This is their total contributions right here. And then this is their monthly expenses. So what it tells you right here is to add up 2, 3, and 4. Well, we got 2, 3, and number 4. Whatever our total is we got to add those up together, okay? Because that's what our real expenses are, not just this part, this part, and this part. They all have to be added up together to find out our total, in this case, of expenses. So we end up at an expense of $3,447.57. Okay, so what you should be noticing right away, income, expenses. Too much expenses, not enough income. What happens next is, well, we're at a deficit here, folks. So we're left at a deficit of $236.57. We'll talk really quickly about what those brackets mean, okay? But if you see brackets, or you should be labeling your stuff in brackets when we do have a deficit, okay, well, this would be the perfect example, okay? So as we talk about in the next set of notes, which is exactly what I was about to talk about. So brackets around the amount of last line means that Jason and Cami spend more money than they earn. This is a deficit, so make sure you highlight that. That was mentioned in section 5 of the summary. If your budget shows a deficit, you must correct this problem by adjusting the amount you spend. So what that simply means is whatever expenses that they had here, okay, likely, probably not these expenses, these annual expenses, but when you look at these monthly expenses, for example, they spent $146 on entertainment. They might want to dwindle that down a little bit. Okay, we talked about the flexibility Gifts, you know, $48, not too bad. Furniture, they might want to find cheaper furniture to buy. Whatever they have to do, they have to be very flexible about their budget. Okay, this is where the flexibility comes in. They have to change some stuff around in order to not be at a deficit. Okay, you don't want to be at a deficit, or you're just going to be owing money repeatedly. Okay, so you always want to stay in a positive direction. Okay. So as you can see in the example, it's positive, it's possible and quite common for people to be in a deficit. So it doesn't mean it's a bad thing or you should be worried, okay? But it's best to avoid a deficit because it must be repaid in the following months or months, okay? Also, a deficit can be very quickly led to a large debt. So, right, you're in a deficit for 1 year or for 1 month. If you continue that on, it could be mounting debt for years and years on end. Okay, so try to avoid that as much as you can. Okay, deficits are often created when credit cards are used to purchase goods you cannot afford. We talked about this in credit interest. When you own a credit card, or maybe you're soon to own a credit card, this is a very big concern. Is that people tend to spend things that they can't afford, or they take the money they think is really theirs, but not necessarily. It's the bank's, and use it up, and then realize, well, I got to pay this off, and maybe not necessarily have the money to actually pay it off. Last thing before I wrap up is example 2, which actually is just a follow up to example 1, which we did with the budgeting. It simply just asks, how could they adjust their spending? Well, we've talked really quickly about it, but they give you kind of an in-depth answer as to what they're looking for. So as I mentioned before, one option could be to wait a month to buy the furniture. They should be able to save enough money in 2 months for the furniture. Another option would be to buy the furniture and spend less on some other items. So again, we talked about the flexibility of a budget, moving some stuff around. Read the rules. They're very important. These are some key rules just to take a look at. Okay, rule number 1 being, as stated before, always pay yourself first. So make sure you're saving that 10%. Don't adjust the saving budget. You want to save money for emergencies. Okay, that's a really important rule. Don't sacrifice your living expenses. So we're talking about think about your basic needs: food, water, shelter, hydro, things like that, mortgage payments. You're going to have to pay those things off. So you can't really adjust those sorts of things. Which follows up to the next rule. Ask yourself, do I really need the stuff I'm buying? So understanding need and wants. Okay, I want a PS4. I want a big TV. I want some nice furniture. Okay, but do you really need those things? Will you survive without them? Likely, right? So think about that. Okay, in this solution, as I mentioned before, they talk about adjusting furniture payments, maybe holding off on buying furniture. By preparing a budget, Jason and Cameron realize that they'll have a shortfall or deficit. So planning ahead, they're doing a really good job of planning ahead and realizing we're going to be in deficit before it happens, so that they can prepare now rather than waiting at the end of the month and saying, oh, we're in a deficit now. So now that they have set up a budget, it's time to practice to make sure you understand. So this is where the homework comes in. So I might have, yes. Okay, so activity 4.1, which is also in your notes, okay, or at least it should be in the homework notes on my teacher website. I do want you to go through all the questions, practice, try your best, and what I'll do is I want to check them. So the way I'm going to check them is hand them into my assignment form, so my submission form, for you to take a look at. And yeah, I'll take a look at it, ask questions. I'll be ready for IG Live on Wednesday. So if you have questions, I'll make sure to post to make sure you guys know your time, so you can ask me questions live as I'm waiting for you guys, or just email me. And if you have Skype or any other means, we can talk face to face as well. Okay, so have a good day, grade 11s. Bye bye.